hackers, today at Vikaran Security we will be pawning the machine startup from TryHackMe. As a beginner, I really like this machine as it taught me a lot of very important concepts at once, which includes abusing write privileges, forensics, exploiting cron jobs, and a lot more. If you're watching this video, you haven't been able to pawn the machine, or you want to understand the methods used to exploit this in depth, and I will be explaining all of that. So let's get started. The first thing I do is connect to my VPN. Once this is done, I'm going to run nmap with the tags enumerate scripts and enumerate versions, and I'm also going to run rust scan side by side, as nmap sometimes misses the ports and rust scan scans all the ports at once, whereas if I get nmap to scan all the ports, it takes a really long time. Once I get all the ports, I'm just going to parse it through nmap. Now if we look at these ports, we already have 3 ports over here, so 21, 22 and 80. Now if we assume that these ports are running their default services, then 21 might be running FTP, 22 might be running SSH, and port 80 might be running HTTP. Let's try to go to port 80. And as you can see here, there is nothing very interesting in the front end, but it's always a very important thing to check the source code. And in the source code, it's very important to check the comments. If you are familiar with HTML, you know that the comments here begin with a less than bracket, an exclamation mark, and 2 hyphens. As you can see, we have only one comment here which doesn't have anything very interesting or sensitive that we can use to exploit. So let's move on and hope that our enumeration is complete. As you can see, sometimes nmap misses out a few details and sometimes rust scan misses out a few details, so it's best to use both. What did nmap really miss here? Nmap missed the fact that FTP is running on anonymous mode, as in I don't really have to give it a password and can still get access to the FTP folder. And SSH and port 80 is running Apache 2.4.18. Now trying to figure out what is going on with SSH. SSH cannot be exploited usually, but it's always good to get the banner once to see if any sensitive information is leaked. And as you can see, there's nothing sensitive in the banner. It's straight away asking us for the root password, which we do not know, so exit, and let's straight away exploit FTP. While FTP is running, I will also run dbuster or brute force the directories for port 80. It is very important to know that you must always have some sort of enumeration running in the background. So for the word list, I'll be using user share seclist discovery web content and common.txt. The reason I use seclist instead of the default ones in word list and dub is because seclist has a lot more options and it's better. Sometimes I have been struggling to solve CTFs because I haven't been using the right word list to enumerate the directories. Now I will not be setting the threads to 100, which I usually do, as it causes a lot of traffic, gets the machine to slow down. Instead, I will set the extensions to PHP and TXT, and the most important tag, the URL. Now that that's running, and look into what's going on with FTP. We have anonymous login enabled, so we can set the username to anonymous, and we can leave the password blank. Login is successful. Let me list out the files, and as you can see, we have a folder called FTP, another file called as important.jpg, and another file called as notice.txt. Now to try to understand what this means, we need to look carefully at this, and the first tag, the D, tells us that this file or FTP is not a file but it's a directory, and important.jpg and notice.txt that do not have D are just files. What do these letters represent? These letters tell us something very important about the file permissions. R stands for read, W stands for write, and X stands for execute. Now again, you must be seeing RWX, 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 the total 3 times. That means we can divide the file permissions into 3 parts. The first part is for the user group, the second part is for the group that owns this file, and the third part is for everyone else. I will be explaining this later when we get a foothold, but as you can see, we right now, because we used anonymous login, we come in the everyone else part. And even though we are in the everyone else part, we do have read, write, and execute permissions. So let's see what's in FTP. And this is an empty folder. You also see that there is a file or a directory called as files in port 80. Let's try to see what that is about. And coincidentally, this also has the same files that are in the FTP directory. So if they have the exact same files, including the same FTP folder, we can assume that they are linked. So how do we figure that out? Now, as you can see, I've already tampered with this machine, and this is my third time recording this, so it already has a few files, but I'll still try to explain what this is about. So to confirm whether these files are linked, I'm just going to write echo test for link into a file called as upload. Now that we are in FTP and in the FTP directory where we also have the right files, I'm just going to upload the file called upload and make sure I'm in the same directory running the FTP service and the same directory where I created the file upload. So sorry, it's not, it's put for upload. Sorry. And as you can see, if we reload this directory, we find a file called as upload and we see the same content. This proves that this directory and the FTP share are linked together. Now, how do we abuse this write privilege that we have? Now, here we can simply just execute a web shell. What I usually do when I get something like this is I locate web shell, use the PHP reverse shell, to the current directory, move PHP reverse shell to something simpler, shell.php, and I will be editing the IP address and the port. Let me just confirm if my IP is correct. Yes, it is 10.11.33.207. And let me also set the port number of my choice, 444. Escape, right quit, Control L, and let me also put in the shell.php file. Now that our shell.php is on the FTP server, I'm also going to open my netcat service on port 444. Now, on clicking on shell.php, it's going to execute the PHP file, and that PHP file has the code for our reverse shell, which will give us the reverse shell on our port 444. Now that we have no use for FTP, I'm just going to exit and enjoy the shell. The first thing I'm going to do is make the shell slightly more interactive. You can convert this into a fully interactive shell, but I am having problems as of now with tmux, so I won't be doing that completely. I'll be making a separate video on that. So the first thing I do is search for Python, which Python is my way of asking Linux if you have a program called as Python, and when it gives me this path called as user bin Python, it is its way of responding that yes, I have a file called as Python, I have a binary called Python, and it's in this path. So that tells me that Python exists. I'm just going to enter a one-liner. In this one-liner, I'll be importing pty, and then telling pty to spawn bin bash to give me a shell. Now I have a shell and I am on the main directory. We have an interesting file called as recipe.txt, which is also owned by www.data. Running whoami will tell us that we are also www.data. So look at recipe.txt. Okay, doesn't contain anything very interesting. Now, a question I get asked a lot about privilege escalation is, what do you do after getting a foothold? And this is the same question that I had, and I irritated a lot of hackers with. After solving a few machines and looking at millions of write-ups, I realized that there is a pattern where you look for sensitive files, and these files exist mostly in directories, OPT, home, and if your machine is hosting a web server, in var www html. So let's start with OPT. OPT is usually where Linux users upload their programs, place their programs. Then the home directory. This will also help us enumerate all the users. And we have only one user here, Lenny. Now let's try to understand the file permissions. Now Lenny here in the first part defines the user group that owns it, and second defines the group that owns this particular directory. The first part, rwx, is for the user. The second part is for the group, and the third part is for everyone else. So try to understand what this means for the folder Lenny. Now we are neither in the Lenny group, we are neither in the Lenny user nor in the Lenny user. That means we have 0 permissions, and to access this we need to somehow escalate our privileges to the user Lenny. Sorry. Now when I run the command id, it's basically telling me that my user id is www-data, my group id is www-data, and these are not the same as Lenny. So basically I have no permissions here. So if you ever want to cross check, you can always use this. Now once you have, and also we have a web server hosted here, so it's always very smart to check the var www html file, and we have nothing very interesting here. The same thing that we saw previously. You can always try going a directory back, and we do not have permission to access that. Now that we have reached a dead end, what do we do? How do we enumerate further? Now normally in these cases I use my personal favorite tool for enumeration after I get a foothold called linpiece, which I also store in OPT, privilege escalation suite, and I have linpiece here. I'm just going to host a Python server with an m simple server. Sorry. Now what I'm doing with this command is I'm simply turning this folder into an online server so that I can use this machine to download a file called as linpiece.sh from this folder remotely. Now I'm just going to ask Linux if it has a file called as wget. It does have it. I'm just going to ask it if it has curl, and it also has curl. Now both these files help me download files from the command line, so I can use curl and then http 10.11.33.207, which is my IP, and this is running on the port 8000. linpiece.sh, the file that I want to download, and I just want to straight away pass it to bash. As you can see, I have a request here. The file is downloaded, and now I can close my server. Now this is a very interesting panel. So if you get red text and yellow background, that means it is definitely a privilege escalation vector. If you get something in red, it is worth looking at. Okay, this is unexpected. Let me open the file again. This time I'll just straight away download. Now the thing that you have to remember is that if you do not have write permissions on a particular folder, you can always go to the folder cdev shm, and all the users have permission to write anything here. So wget http 10.11.33.207 on port 8000, linpiece.sh. And now that the file is downloaded, I'm just going to run the command chmod +x linpiece.sh to give it the execute privileges. I'm going to run the file again. Now that this is running, we can already start looking at the data it has given back. Ping nc. You can always try kernel exploits over here. Just copy this and look for kernel exploits. If we have a sudo privilege abuse, we can abuse this version number if it has vulnerabilities. I think here, yes, this is a virtual machine. Shows us all the running services. Now if you look carefully, we use the Apache service to execute a PHP file which gives us bash, and then we run this command which gives us our bash command line, and run linpiece.sh which then executes ps to show this output. Now if you look at services, we do not have anything worth looking at. Path analyzing service files, and now it has completed enumerating. Let's look at the other data it has given us. Nothing interesting here. String group writable files. As you can see, it gives you a lot of data and it can be very helpful just looking at this one by one. Like interesting writable files owned by me are writable by everyone. As you can see that we see something very suspicious over here. There's a folder in the main directory called as incidents. We'll come back to this. Interesting readable hidden files. This also contains a lot of sensitive data. Backup files, and always check them. And now this is the one that gives us a clear indication on what we have to do next. Unexpected in root. It also looks for unexpected files. So just like how recipe.txt isn't supposed to be on the main directory, and incidents is also not supposed to be on the main directory. So let's try to look at what that's all about. Incidents. And we have a suspicious.pcapng file. Pcap stands for packet capture, which means it's a file generated by Wireshark where some traffic was captured. And now to analyze this file, we must download it on our local machine. So as we know that this machine already has Python, so we are just going to host a simple HTTP server here this time. I'm just going to copy the port of this machine. You can also move it to this directory, but I don't think so we have permissions for that. Anyhow, I'm just going to use this wget http. I think http might already be copied. Yes, port 8000, and then suspicious pcapng, and our file was downloaded. So we can close this, but pressing Ctrl C will just kill the shell. Let me just look at what is in here. So I'm going to open the directory, and I'm just also going to run Wireshark. Now if I run Wireshark here, I won't be allowed to type anything else because it will be just printing the Wireshark process or what's going on in it. I'm just going to end this with an AND symbol, so that I'll also be allowed. So this process will be running in the background, and I'll be allowed to type file open, root, thm, startup suspicious.pkapng, open file, and now this is the packet capture. Now we have stepped into the forensics part of this challenge. Let's try to figure out what's happening. These are all TCP services. We also see HTTP services. Now, instead of trying to make sense of all this data, I'm just going to take one of these packets and I just can't find it. Follow the TCP stream. Okay, close. Let's go back. Okay, we get another interesting thing that we can try to read and make sense of. Okay, so basically this is just executing the PHP file. Okay, now this is quite interesting. So basically they might have probably used netcat just like how we are using, and now the problem about netcat is the data that it sends and receives is all unencrypted, as in we can see everything in clear text just like how we can see right now. If we were to use SSH secure shell, all of this would be gibberish. So let's try to make sense of this. So all the things that are highlighted with the red color are from the server. All the things highlighted from the blue color are the user inputs. So as we can see that the attack and that the pkapng logs the attacker first running ls, then lsla to list all the files including hidden files. It also upgrades its shell just like us, goes to cd, goes to home, and goes to Lenny, the permissions denied. Okay, cd Lenny, the permission still denied, and it executes sudo l to try to find out sudo privileges and abuse it. It also uses password, can't get enough spice, for ww data, which was then rejected, and then we don't see anything else. But what can we do with this password if it was rejected? So all I can think about right now is if the creators of this machine have given us this password, it's for some reason. And the only one attack I can probably think about executing right now is a password reuse attack. Now our netcat shell is killed, and this might be the password of the user Lenny. So we also know that there's an SSH service open, lennie, Lenny at copy. Shift V, delete the HTTP. Now one very important thing that you must do is when you get proper user credentials or when you get access as a user and SSH is open on the machine, always upgrade your shell, and the best way to do that is SSH because it never gets better. Sometimes you will have to edit files using nano or vim, and you cannot do them with a shell without a fully interactive TTY. So right now I have SSH and I'll be using this. I might have potential credentials. I have potential credentials for Lenny, and I'll try to use them. Hopefully they work. Okay, I copied the password wrong. Sorry. Okay, now let's try to figure out what's going on. And as you can see, if you go to who am I, we are Lenny, and current working directory, we are in the home folder, lstack.la. We have this file called as user.txt. Now user.txt is your user flag. Copy this. I won't be showing this right now. Now let's try to enumerate more. See what else does this user have. I'm just going to cat all the files. Okay, few cyber jokes here. A shopping list. Talk about our remnant about lacking security, hire a web developer, delete the incident logs, which they didn't do. Then go back. Let's figure out what's in scripts. Sorry. We have a file called as planner.sh, which we can execute. Now, the main permissions are given to root. And we also have a file called as startup list. I'm going to just cat planner.sh So what now, this is a simple bash script that echoes the variable list. Now this, what $list means is it's an environment variable. Let me just try to figure out what this is. So you can just simply do that by running echo $list, which is empty, and then sends it into startup list, and then runs another file called as etcprint.sh. Now let's find out what print.sh contains. It just prints done, okay, and less ld to get some more information on the file permissions for this particular file. Okay, we have read, write, and execute permissions, and this is running as Lenny, and this is for the user Lenny. So that means we can edit this file. Now, how do we really use this to our advantage? Now, at this point of scenario, if you have some experience, you would have already figured out that this is a cron job. For those of you who don't know what a cron job is, it's basically scheduled tasks for Linux. If you want to run a particular command or a particular script at regular intervals of time, you can configure Linux to do that for you. And this is mostly done in a file called as etc cron tab. Now there's nothing in cron tab right now. So if there is nothing in cron, as you can see, you can set the month, hour, date of the month, or things like that to tell the operating system when to execute your particular file. Now, how can I tell that this is a cron job even if there is nothing in etc cron tab? For this, we'll be using a software called as pspy. Now, one very important thing to know about pspy is you need to make sure that you are running the right version. You have a pspy 64-bit version and a 32-bit version. Uname A tells us that this is a 64-bit version, so I know that it'll work. I need a compiled version, so we can go to releases, pspy 64, open containing folder, open containing folder, open terminal here, python m simple http server, just like how we moved linps, wget http 10.11.33.207 port 8000 pspy 64. This doesn't happen most of the time, but I'm just going to copy the link, paste it again. Now that pspy 64 is downloaded, the next thing that we do is we change the permissions and give it execute privileges. Now that pspy is running, we simply wait. What pspy does is that it monitors all the processes and gives it timestamps accordingly. So if planner.sh is a cron job, as soon as it gets executed, it's going to be shown here in the output. The most important thing that we'll also realize is who executes it. If it is root that is executing the cron job at a particular interval, then we can edit the files in there, or the files being executed, which will also be executed by the root to give us a shell. And if the code for giving us the shell is executed by the root, we can get the root shell. And as you can see, exactly after 1 minute, planner.sh is executed, and most importantly by uid0, which is the user ID for the root user. So now we can exit this, and we know how to work with this. So go to scripts, Now the thing about planner.sh is that when it comes to the user and group, we are neither the root, we do not even have the root group. That means we come in the everyone else position, so we can only execute and read the file, but we cannot write it. If you carefully look at planner.sh, it also runs an additional file called a sprint.sh. And running this command gives us the information about the permissions of the print.sh file, which we have write access to. So on figuring out what's in this, we see that it is an extremely simple script which just prints done, nothing very special. Now how do we exploit this? We do not have write permissions for planner.sh, but we have write permissions for a file that is executed inside this, not print.sh. Now because this planner.sh file is being executed by root, because print.sh is also executed inside this, it will also be executed by the root. So the best thing that we can do here, now the thing is, I'm going to generate another reverse shell, another one-liner, and my favorite website to do this is revshells.com. Just for my foothold, I normally use port 4444, and when I'm hoping to get root, I use port 999. And I'm just going to edit this file simply by entering the command and sending the output to etc print.sh. Now that this is done, I'm going to quickly open a port on 999. If we run pspy once again, in a few seconds, planner.sh should be run again, as it runs at the start of every minute. And as you can see, planner.sh was run. Inside planner.sh, print.sh was executed, and because it was executed by the root, we get the root shell. Who am I? We are root, we are in the root directory, and we now have access to the root.txt file. So I really hope you enjoyed this and you have learned something. Feel free to drop your suggestions down in the comment box. If you have noticed a fact that was wrong, please, you can also talk about that. For more videos, please subscribe and press the notification button. Thank you.